Everybody set? We'll call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we'll go for the approval of the minutes from our last meetings. Has everybody had a chance to review those? If so, I'd take a recommendation to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion made and second for the minutes. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted upon by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen would request, in which event an item will be removed from the general order of business and considered separately in its normal sequence on the agenda. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Motion made and second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? At this time, before we go into public hearings, I just want to make a comment on behalf of Mayor Brink, the entire City Council, and our city staff. I want to say thank you to all the volunteers that have made the Polar Fest experience happen here in our city of Detroit Lakes. Volunteers are the backbone of every city, and Detroit Lakes has a strong backbone. Last Thursday night, we had the lighting of the Ice Palace, and we had an unbelievable turnout of people for this event. People in cars that were compared to what we would have on a July 4th day. Volunteers made this event happen. So if you know one of these people that worked on that project, please give them a big thank you. Also, we want to say a special thank you to the Polar Fest Committee. There's still lots of activities left to go on here in Detroit Lakes during the next week and a half. And once again, none of this will be possible without having volunteers to do all the work that it takes to make this project go like they should. This weekend, we've got a lot of things going on, including the Polar Fest, or the Polar Plunge for the Boys and Girls Club. And at 1 o'clock, we're going to have the Polar Plunge is going to start. Hopefully we'll have a good turnout, and all that money goes to support the Boys and Girls Club. And of course, on Saturday night at 7 p.m., we'll have the fireworks on the beach. We encourage everybody to come on down, have fun in Detroit Lakes. And there's many more activities. If you'd like to have a list of all the activities, please get a hold of the Chamber of Commerce, and there's lots of fun here at wintertime in the lakes area. Okay, at this time we'll move on to the public hearing. We're going to join our regular meeting, and we're going to start out with item A, annexation for public hearing. So Kelsey, go over that one.
I think we're waiting for one more. Oh, here he is. Perfect timing. So the agenda item for tonight is actually a joint meeting between the City of Detroit Lakes and Lakeview Township to consider an orderly annexation agreement. And along with that is actually a public hearing on it. So unless there's any exception by the township, I'd ask Vice Mayor Zeman to call that meeting to order.
At this time, I'll call this meeting to order then.
And also then call the public hearing for basically input on the orderly annexation agreement for property in Lakeview Township. Basically, it's property located along Randolph Road and County Highway 54.
At this time, I'll call that for consideration to approving the orderly annexation between the City of Detroit Lakes and Lakeview Township, Randolph Road, County Highway 54. So at this time, we would invite people who would like to come up and speak to this issue, probably starting with Lakeview.
We were approached by the city considering Randolph Road because of the realignment and stoplights put in on Highway 10. And there's about 1,200 feet of Randolph Road that's technically Lakeview Township. And in order to build that road up to the right load specifications, we felt that it would be good to with MnDOT and the city of Detroit Lakes have it turned over to the city. That section. Right. The extra land from Marv Mickelson property there. The concern we had, he was not real interested in being in this as of the present time. So we agreed to the situation of immediate annexation of Randolph Road and an annexation for a 5-year delay on the other property. So we're agreeing to annexation, but it's going to be a 5-year delay. Now, on that portion, if that land is sold, then property owners can petition for immediate annexation. That's what we understand. I don't know how it is. And we, based on that, I thought maybe Mr. Gregerson would be here, but all the times we've had conversations with him, he was totally understood what the situation was.
Okay, so at this time, you're looking at for the immediate portion of Randolph Road to come in, but then a 5-year delay on County Highway 54, on that land part there then. Is that understood by everybody then? Any other clarification we need on that, Kelsey?
No, the orderly annexation agreement that's in the packet, the joint resolution, is basically spells out those terms.
Okay, then at this time, I'd like to have a motion from someone for the annexation for this property.
So moved.
Some motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
We should also, the township too will may take similar action.
Okay, now, Township, would you like to go ahead and make the similar action then?
At this time right here,
Yes.
we've already accepted that in a formal meeting motion, and the clerk and I will have to sign off on it.
Okay, all right. That's what they said.
Yeah, we just need to make sure that the township has approved the agreement just the same as the city
It's
did.
in our minutes, and we can include the minutes.
Hey, Charlie, is I'm not up to speed on all of the reality, but should that have been done at the annual meeting?
I guess that's a question that you probably have to talk to the township council about, but I mean, generally, if it was authorized at the annual meeting, then it would be of the town board. Then the township could proceed with it without doing it at the annual meeting, but it should have been authorized by the electors at the annual meeting.
That, it was brought up after our annual meeting is in March, and it was brought to us after that date, and so the next annual meeting is about a month and a half.
Yeah.
And, so if you feel that is something, and we check with our see, as of right now, the township board has approved it.
Okay.
And was that a regular meeting?
Is that a regular
meeting?
Yeah, I think that's adequate.
We have a
Okay.
representative with them that worked with them over the years, so there was.
So we'll have our city staff and attorney wait for the paperwork from your township board, and then we'll be through then.
Well, you're putting your copy together.
Yeah, okay, we'll have it then, all right. Okay, that takes care of yours, and thank you. Next item is 4B, public hearing to give and receive public comments on the proposed sanitary sewer and water main improvements for Broadline Estates, first edition. Also consideration to resolution ordering proposed sanitary sewer and water main improvements for Broadline Estates, first edition. John, do you want to start on this?
1 second here, we're going to
All right.
do a presentation. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Or do I need to slide this up? Got it? Good? Okay. As the Vice Mayor indicated, we're going to have a short public hearing considering some sanitary sewer and water main improvements to Broadline Estates. And basically we're here, this is a requirement. Anytime we involve a project that involves special assessments, we have to hold a public hearing. And of course, we want the public's input and concerns and questions. So I'll run through some of the existing background, some of the conditions out there, what we're proposing to do, what the estimated costs are, and what the assessments look like, and things of that nature. So a little bit of background on this project. This was not a project that was initiated by the city. Rather, the city was petitioned by a number of the property owners out in the Broadline Estates First Edition, that portion of the subdivision. All of the property owners have signed the petition, but not necessarily all of the properties have signed the petition. There's property owners out there that own multiple properties. So, but that's the driver. Poor water quality, poor well water. So there's some interest in getting municipal sewer and water out there. We held a public informational meeting, just an informal meeting with that neighborhood back in December. That's a typo, I'm sorry, December of 17. Had folks in here and talked about it a little bit. Subsequent to that, we prepared a feasibility study and adopted that in January, which brings us to tonight. So Broadline Estates is a fairly small subdivision, about 11 acres. There's roughly 16 lots. It's located just north of Tower Road and east of County Road 131. About half of the properties are developed with residential homes, and the other half are undeveloped or vacant. There is no existing sanitary sewer or water main in the subdivision. We do have sewer and water located on Tower Road, just to the south edge of the subdivision. That was installed in 2012, and we have some stubs going up to North Ridge Road, sort of in anticipation of sewer and water going here at some point. The existing road is just a fairly simple 18-foot wide rural section roadway. It's actually in pretty good shape. So what we're proposing to do, again, the primary objective would be to extend sewer and water services to this neighborhood, be 8-inch water main and 8-inch sanitary sewer, fire hydrants. We'd put service laterals out to the edges of the property. I would note that those final connections from the end of the service laterals to the home is still something that would be the responsibility of the property owner. We go up to the edge of the property, and then they have to take it from there. So it's a pretty straightforward project in that regard. You won't be able to see this, so I apologize. This is just simply illustrating sewer and water alignment going right up North Ridge Road. One note I did want to make, this is sort of the high point of the world out there, at least for the immediate area. And what that means is water pressure is going to be a little less than what I would call typical, probably around that plus or minus 40 PSI. Depending on what you're used to, that may be okay, that may be not so okay. But it's just sort of a warning that I would say the average pressure in our system is closer to 50 PSI, but because of that elevation out there, it is a little bit less. That can be cured with in-house booster stations. You can buy pumps that boost the pressure, and that's a cure for it. We don't have any immediate plans right now to boost the system in that area, but it's something we're aware of and we'll keep looking at in the future. Street improvements, we got to remove the street to put the sewer and water in, so we'll remove what's out there. We'll replace it with a somewhat wider street. The idea being this street would be owned and maintained by the city of Detroit Lakes if the project moved ahead, so we do want something a little bit wider. We are considering a base option being just a 28-foot wide rural section street, so similar to what's out there, but slightly wider. Similar to what we've used in some other similar annexation projects. An alternate to this, if the property owners wanted or asked for it, we could do something along the lines of like a 36-foot wide urban section street, which is in line with what you see in most of the subdivisions that go in around town now. But we're not necessarily saying that has to be done. It's an option. We'd make some minor improvements to that gravel connection that on the north end of the subdivision that goes back out to County Road 131, but very minor. We just widen it out a little bit, put some gravel down, leave it alone. Really, it's just a place for the plow trucks to be able to come in and get back out of there without having to turn around. Stormwater, the gist of this is when we rebuild the road, whether we like it or not, we need to deal with stormwater treatment. We have to comply with current city and stormwater or watershed requirements. So Likely, if we just did a rural section road, we would be probably constructing some very mild ditches, but they will be some depressions along the roads, some culverts and things of that nature to collect the storm water, convey it, and then those ditches will actually be designed to hold some of that water. We get a lot of comment after some of these projects that, well, the ditch is holding water. Yep, it is, and it's designed to do that. It's designed to infiltrate, and it'll probably have some standing water in it after a rain event for a short period. It's real sandy soils up there, so it should disappear relatively quickly. Contrary to that, if we went with an urban section street, then we would have storm water and or storm sewer rather, and a centralized treatment basin. Some other improvements, if the area was annexed and the project moved ahead, I believe the city's electric utility would probably attempt to acquire the electrical service territory, so it would fall under the city's electric utility at that point. We haven't had a lot of discussion on the details of that at this point, but generally speaking, the city's electric utility has a little bit more favorable rates and some improved reliability compared to the competition, if you will. We'd also likely do a little bit of street lighting. So some of the caveats that come with sewer and water. The first one is the city's policy is any area that's getting sewer and water has to be annexed into the city. So all of this would be predicated on an annexation agreement with that area and with the township. Connection to the sewer is required within 1 year, generally speaking. The exceptions to that is if the septic is less than 10 years old, you can delay that connection for up to 10 years from the date of the original installation. So in other words, if your septic is, say, 3 years old right now, you would have 7 years before you'd have to make that connection. So it's sort of a prorated 10-year deferment, if you want to look at it that way. The other thing would be, if you have a septic system that fails, then you're required to hook up immediately. Project costs. We're looking at just about a $500,000 project to put the sewer, the water, the services in, deal with the storm water, rebuild the roadway. Cost allocation, that's all specified by the city's special assessment policy. This is something that we try to apply to each and every project so that the cost split between the city and the property owners remains consistent project to project. In general, the sanitary sewer, 100% of the cost of that is assessed to the property owners. Service laterals, same thing, 100% of the cost is assessed. Water main, 100% of a standard main is assessed. Standard main is considered a 6-inch main at this time. So any oversizing would be picked up by the city or looping. And then the city assumes the hydrant costs. Service laterals are 100%. And then the city's policy is 50% of the street reconstruction costs are assessed, and the city picks up the remaining 50% since this is a reconstruction. City also pays 100% of hydrants I already mentioned, stormwater, and the lighting. So once you break all that down by numbers, this is what it looks like. The city would end up picking up about $173,000 of the project. $344,000 would be assessed to the adjacent property owners. So now we'll get into how is that $344,000 allocated to the properties. It's through a special assessment. Assessments are typically applied to property taxes for a 15 to 20 year period is the most likely case. Interest rates will depend on where things are at the time, but as of lately, that's been right around 4 to 6%. You always have the option to prepay any portion, all or any portion of your special assessment to help knock down interest charges, or you don't have to prepay anything, and it simply goes on your taxes and is amortized over that term. So these assessable costs, again, are distributed in accordance with our assessment policy, and basically these costs are divided by the number of units that are available, and that might be frontage or area or user benefit to determine a rate. And I'll kind of try to walk through this a bit. Sewer and water assessment is comprised of two pieces in this case. It's comprised of a front footage charge and then also a user benefit charge. So the assessable cost for any one of those components, let's just say water, the assessable cost for just water main is split. 50% is allocated towards the front footage charge, 50% towards a user. And what, at the end of the day, what this is it's a blend between a per lot assessment and a front footage assessment. And there's some method to that to help make the assessments a little bit more equitable between the various size properties and things of that nature. So a UBC is calculated by dividing that corresponding cost by the number of potential users. Generally speaking, that's a lot. And so this results in a lump sum per lot. One component of your assessment for sewer and water is a lump sum per lot. Front footage, we take that cost and we divide it by the number of front feet that are available. Front footage is usually the width of your lot. If you have a funky shaped lot, we generally try to look at an average width. And it ultimately results in a cost per foot. Service laterals are assessed on an each basis, so that's pretty straightforward. Couple comments on lift station. The Tower Road lift station that's at the east end of Tower Road was designed to ultimately handle this area up here. So a portion of the original cost was allocated to this subdivision. And at the time, that rate was established at $800 per lot. And that's what the folks along Tower Road have paid thus far. Street, it's all on a front footage basis. There's no user benefit charge, no UBC. Rectangular interior lots, it's simply the width of your lot. If you have a corner lot, it's the width of your lot plus half the distance of your side lot, assuming that the road really wraps around two sides. And in this case, that doesn't apply, so I'm not going to confuse the discussion with it. Again, irregular shaped lots, we put an average dimension to it. So after all that babbling, this is what it looks like. So for the street, we're calculating an assessment rate of about $47 per foot. Sanitary sewer, again, made up of two pieces. The base assessment, the front footage is $23 a front foot. And then you have a user benefit charge of about $3,050. Sewer services, about $1,900 each. Lift stations, $800 a lot. Water main, $18 per front foot and $2,400 user benefit, lump sum. And a residential water service of $2,500. So that's all the rates that we've calculated based on that discussion that I just had. So what it really means for people, there's really a lot of those lots out there are pretty uniform in size. There's generally speaking only about two sizes of lots. There's 120-foot lots. If you're a 120-foot typical lot, you're going to be looking at a total assessment, which is that base and that UBC, of about $21,000. The 150-foot lots, you're looking at about just shy of $24,000. And then there's one larger lot out there, about 225 feet. And that lot would be looking at about $30,000. If I lost anybody on that, you can always get a hold of me and I'll explain it in more detail. It's a little tough to follow, but. Deferred assessments. Portion of these assessments may be deferred for undeveloped properties. Like I mentioned, there's a number of properties out there that are undeveloped right now. And the city has been working on trying to come up with a consistent policy to apply of how do we assess undeveloped properties. This is the methodology. So if you have an undeveloped property, what we're proposing is the street would be assessed immediately. That would go on the tax rolls as soon as the project's done. The base assessment for the sewer and water mains and then the service laterals will be deferred for the shorter of 5 years or until developed. If you don't plan to do anything with that vacant property, that portion of the assessment is kicked out for 5 years. No interest is charged during that 5-year deferment. It just sits there for 5 years. Gives you time to either come up with a plan, unload it, or potentially financially prepare for it. The sewer and water user benefit charges and the lift station assessment would be deferred until the property's developed. I'm sorry, I needed to change this and I didn't catch this. The discussion yesterday was they would be deferred with a sunset of probably at least 20 years, 20 to 25 years. That's been the discussion at this point. But the discussion at Public Works yesterday was to put a sunset to those. So that's how this would all shake out for the undeveloped properties. Real quickly on a project schedule, I'm not going to go through all of this, but if this project were to move ahead, we're right near the top of this right now, the public hearing. If the project moves ahead, it sends us into the design phase. We would likely get design wrapped up later this spring, bid the project, in that May, June timeframe. Probably be looking at construction mid to later part of the year would be my guess. Finish it up this fall, be back here for the actual assessment hearing. Your final assessment's ultimately based on those final project costs. Everything I've presented is just my own estimates. And so your final assessment would be based on those actual construction costs. And likely we would do a final lift of pavement in the spring of 2019. So back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
At this time, I'm going to have Jay read the resolution, and then we'll go to a public hearing to hear comments from the audience.
So you want to read?
What do we have on that?
Okay. So, Public Works Committee had a chance to discuss this. We had a discussion on undeveloped properties and assessments. We are recommending deferring assessments for up to 20 years on undeveloped properties. It's up to 20 years at this point. Yes. So there'll be some more discussion to follow, and so Public Works recommends approval, and I so move.
Second.
There's a motion, a second. So at this time, we'll have a public hearing. If anybody in the audience would like to speak to this proposal, please come up to the podium and give us your name and give us your comments. Does anybody want to make a comment at this time on this?
Questions also?
My name's Al Clark. I live out on Northridge Road, and no real questions. I had one, but I think it was explained about the property owners. I know the ones that have the open lots aren't too happy on being assessed. So now I hear it's going to be pushed out, but it sounds like only 5 years.
A portion of it?
For a portion of it?
The
Is it
street-
the biggest part of it or the smaller part of it? I mean, that's
Big,
that's
the bigger. I mean,
because you're talking water and sewer is gonna be
So-
20, push back 20
So
years?
if you use that $21,000 figure,
Mhm.
about 15,000 of that would be deferred for 5 years, and then the balance would be deferred up to 20 years.
Okay, so within 5 years, he's gonna have to come up,
about three
the
quarters.
property owner will have to come up with the rest of that after 5 years.
You have to come up with
For-
about 3/4 of it
Yeah.
at 5 years. And the
Okay.
balance is gonna get deferred.
But the balance gets financed over.
Correct, yep.
The remainder.
But what I'm getting at is, after 5 years, he's gonna have to come up with 3/4 of,
It'll go on your tax.
On his taxes,
It'll
right.
start going, it'll
Yep.
get amortized starting
Correct.
5 years out.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So you'd
Okay.
have
But it
probably,
doesn't do all at once.
no,
No.
not do it all at once, but that starts 5 years
Right.
out. Yes.
Yep, okay,
That's accurate.
all right, see if I can get it by him and find out, but, I know he's been in talking to other people about it, so. And then, I'm just wishing we could've got it done a couple of years ago. I mean, I got two full home filter systems before it comes right out of the well, before it hits my softener. Every week I gotta change that filter. And they're $8 a shot, so
That's
the sooner we can get going, I mean, it'd be great, because it's just terrible out there. We can't keep the filters clean and plugging your lines in your houses and your faucets and everything, but we should have been going at it a few years before this, I guess, but glad to hear it's coming up, and hopefully we can get it going, and so, all right, thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else for questions or comments? If not, then that portion is closed, and it's to the city council. There's a motion on the floor. Okay, excuse me, Kelsey.
Mayor and council, the only thing I would add is, as you heard, we do need that annexation agreement executed before we really can move ahead. So we do need, yeah, so my suggestion is, I know there's a motion and there's a second, but we really should make it contingent upon getting that annexation agreement, that annexation petition executed.
Okay.
So can I amend my
Amend the motion for that then?
Okay, so, let's see here. So we are making a motion to contingent on the orderly annexation of Broadline Estates.
You're basically approving the resolution, aren't you?
Resolution, correct.
That's in the packet.
Yes.
And that's the resolution that's authorizing improvements and ordering the preparation of plans and specifications for Broadline Estates First Edition sanitary sewer and water main improvements.
Contingent.
Contingent.
It's contingent on the annexation.
Yes.
And do we need to put anything on the up to 20 years?
That really would come at the assessment.
Yep.
Okay.
But
Okay, is that okay with you, Madeline, for your second then?
Yep.
Okay. Is there any questions of the council on this then? No questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries then. Next item is C, is a public hearing to give and receive public comments on the proposed sanitary sewer and water main improvements for County Road 131.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I'll do a bit of a presentation here, although I'm going to try to shorten it up because it's a lot of repeat. So once again, we're going to have a public hearing on related to proposed sanitary sewer and water main improvements along County Road 131. Like I said, anytime we do a project that potentially involves special assessments, we're required to have a public hearing. It's an opportunity to give comments and questions and things of that nature. So I'll run around the background. Where did this come from? What are we planning to do? What are the costs? All of that good stuff. So a little bit of background. There's a couple of things driving this project. One of them, Fultz Trucking has approached the city and requested city sewer and water services be extended to their property, which is at the west end of County Road 131, right out by Highway 59. And the second component of this is anybody that's drove County Road 131 knows that it's in very, very poor condition. The county's been wanting to make improvements to that segment of the road for a number of years and really has been deferring at our behest until we figured out if we want to get sewer and water underneath that roadway as part of that improvements. Once the road is improved, the cost to get that sewer and water in goes up substantially. Effectively, the city then would have to eat the cost of replacing a new road. It doesn't make a lot of sense to put a new road in 5 years from now, rip it off, put sewer and water in and rebuild the road. So it is a cost-effective opportunity for the city to get sewer and water down this area should we choose. So with these things in mind, we prepared and adopted a preliminary engineering report in January, which brings us to this evening. So the project area, this is all currently outside the city limits, although we're in the process of annexing the Fultz property and the County Road 131 right-of-way to provide a connection to the corporate limits of the city. All the other property at this time will remain outside the city. So the properties on both the north and the south side of 131, with the exception of the Fultz trucking property, would remain outside the corporate limits. Real quickly, existing infrastructure. We don't have any city sewer and water specifically in this area. However, we do have sewer and water located at the intersection of 131 Tower Road, Stony Road, on the east end of the project corridor. And that was installed in 2017 most recently with last summer's Highway 59 project. There's an existing street out there. It's about 24 feet wide. Like I said, very, very poor condition and needs replacement. So what we're planning to do, again, primary goal is extend sewer and water to the west from that Stony Road intersection. We would take off where we left off last year, pull them all the way to the west, and we would actually bend and head back to the south on the Trunk Highway 59 frontage road a bit as well. Generally speaking, the water main improvements, 8 and 12-inch water main, fire hydrants, Ultimately, this system would be looped back to the Hillcrest water main that was installed in 2017. Sewer improvements, 8 and 10-inch sanitary sewer. I wanted to note that we will not have sufficient depth at the west end, likely, so down near the Foltz property, to service a typical basement. The sewer gets relatively shallow as we get down there. It's still sufficient for serving a slab on grade type of a structure. We might be able to get a basement, but I'm just sort of alluding to we may not, depending on some different conditions. So a basement would have to be pumped to the main floor, which isn't uncommon, but our depth gets a little bit less than desirable at that westernmost end. Again, service laterals, we would extend those to the edges of each of the properties, even the properties that are outside the city. We will extend service laterals to the edge of them, and ultimately that property owner is required to connect there and make that connection to the home. Again, if you can probably barely see this, but this is just an illustration of where we're going to be going in the utility corridor. The blue is the water main, and that sort of purple looking line is the sewer. Like I said, it's that whole section, and then we are bending back south along the west side of the Foltz property, and that's where we'll be stopping the project. Same comment really as I made in the previous presentation about water pressure. Not so bad over at the west end because the elevation drops, but towards the east end of this project segment by the intersection of Stony Road, I would expect less than favorable water pressures, again flirting with that 40 psi. Again, in-home booster pumps could be a way to mitigate this. Street improvements. These will actually be done by Becker County, and I talked to the county this afternoon. We're looking at doing a cooperative project with them where we would do all of the improvements under one contract. That's just makes dollars, cents for both the city and the county. But we have to remove it to get to the sewer, to put the sewer and water in. The proposed street that would go in would match the rest of Tower Road to the east of the project area. So it'd be a 36-foot wide graded surface with a 26-foot wide pavement area and then gravel shoulders. And then we'd also have a little bit of patching on the frontage road that we would have to do. Stormwater, same story. We redo the road, we have to comply with current stormwater regulations. We anticipate doing most of that stormwater treatment within the ditch areas that are alongside the roadway. We may have to put some swales and berms in to actually hold and capture the water and infiltrate it. So some of those ditches are actually could be designed to hold some amount of water, at least immediately after a rain event. Should disappear fairly quickly. Again, we have great soils up there. So conditions of sewer and water. I won't beat this to death. Again, we have to, any property that gets sewer and water would require annexation. We're working with Foltz Trucking on annexing their property. Any other properties that are along this corridor now are going to have access to sewer and water, but before they can connect to it, you would have to petition the city to annex your property. If you get annexed, then you could make that connection. Project costs. We're looking at just shy of $500,000 for this project, $486,000. Again, that doesn't include the street and the stormwater costs. Those costs would be paid by Becker County. So this is purely the sewer and water costs. Costs get allocated in accordance with our special assessment policy. I want to note that assessments to properties that are currently outside the city limits are postponed until annexation occurs. So there's not actually an assessment that will be levied against the property. The assessment is postponed until such time that the property is annexed. So at this point, the only property we're talking about is the Foltz Trucking property. All other properties would be postponed. Cost distribution, again, sewer, 100% of a standard sewer main is assessed. City assumes oversizing. Sewer laterals, 100% is assessed. Water main, 100% of a standard main, meaning a 6-inch main, is assessed. The city picks up that size for any oversizing, looping, general transmission costs, things of that nature. So in this case, we've got a fairly large water main going in, so the city does pick up a good chunk of the water main due to that oversight. 100% of the service lateral is assessed. Street and stormwater, again, being paid by the county, so that's not in the realm of discussion here for the assessments. So this is what it looks like, all said and done. The city would end up picking up about $142,000. That represents some oversizing on the sewer, water main, and hydrants. And then the assessable share of the project is about $350,000. Of that, only about $54,000 is actually going to be immediately assessed. That represents the assessments to the Foltz property, and about $290,000 would be postponed until properties in that area are indexed. Keep in mind, this figure does not include a lift station assessment that's already been placed out as a postponed assessment. So we'll get to that. So now we allocate those assessable costs. It's really the same methodology that I just went through. They go on tax rolls generally for 15 to 20 years, 4 to 6% interest. You can prepay to reduce interest charges if you wish. We distribute those costs in accordance with our assessment policy. We take the cost divided by the number of rates, or number of units to come up with a rate. Same thing, sewer and water is comprised of a two-component assessment, a front footage assessment, and then a user benefit assessment. We split those costs 50-50 between those two components to come up with our rate. Unless anybody has any specific questions, I'm not going to go through the methodology here again. It's taking those costs divided by units to come up with rates, and I'd like to just sort of fast forward. I do need to stop on this. We do have an assessment that would be levied against any property that's annexed into the city under this project. For the lift station that was put in last summer on Highway 59, there was a postponed assessment related to that lift station. And the rate for that was established at about $3,200 an acre. So that would come into play and be levied when a property is annexed. But it's not a cost that we've incurred under this project. So what all that means, again, sanitary sewer, looking at about $28 per front foot, user benefit charge of about $4,000 per lot, sewer services of about $2,300, lift station and force main, just indicated, $3,200 per acre, water main, $21 per front foot, plus about a $3,000 per lot user benefit, and water services about $2,800. So there's some different examples up there. There's a lot of variation in lot size in this area. There's some small lots that are kind of in that quarter acre, 50 feet wide. They'd be looking at about a $15,000 assessment, all said and done. 100-foot lot, about $18,000, and 150-foot lot, closer to an acre in size, would be about $22,000. One last time, assessments. Properties outside the city are postponed. So those are not attached to your property at this point if you're not in the city. So that's virtually everybody, again, other than Foltz. Project schedule, assuming that the council proceeds with this. We've done the hearing tonight in February. We'd approved plans and specs probably later this summer, or later this spring rather. So we'd get into design over the next couple of months, come back, ask for approval to go to bid, probably start construction. Again, I think it's going to be probably the mid to later part of the summer, just based on where we're at in the process. And then we would potentially have an assessment hearing back here in the fall based on actual construction costs. Talking with the county, we likely would only put one lift of pavement down this year and come back in the spring and put the final lift down. So that's all I have, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you, John. I've got a question, Kelsey. When do you think that this annexation could possibly be complete as far as?
This annexation's already been submitted to Municipal Board of Boundary Adjustments, because we've already had the hearing and we've had the petition signed. So basically, we're just waiting to hear back from them
Okay, so it could be in a matter of
by the end of the month.
end of the month. Okay.
I think you're talking about the Fultz,
I'm talking about the Fultz.
not the rest of there. That's just the Fultz.
On the Fultz part then.
I'm talking about the Fultz.
Fultz part, okay, but how about the
Oh,
rest
boy.
of it then?
Yeah, the rest of it.
Yeah, the big picture.
Well, that depends. There'd have to be some other action taken to make that annexation occur. One of the most common ways is like we saw with Fultz and even with Broadline, is if the neighbors would petition to be annexed in, then we could basically go through the annexation. Otherwise, we'd have to work with an orderly annexation agreement like we did earlier tonight with Lakeview with Detroit Township. But that's a hard question to answer, because one of those other actions would have to take place before the annexation could occur.
So in that part was 220,000 approximately?
I think you're correct. Yep.
Yep.
290.
290,000.
Mr. Vice Mayor, if I could add,
Okay,
nobody can predict any of this for certain. There's no doubt. I mean, we cannot accurately predict when properties are going to petition to come in or what actions would happen. I would say that, looking back over the course of 15 years, generally speaking, we get sewer and water in place. It doesn't take very long before properties start coming in. When their wells or their septic start to die, generally it's a cheaper option to tie into that sewer and water that's out front of their property. So generally they'll come in, and we've seen that with other projects that are similar. Granted, I will tell you there's a lot more of them in this case.
Mr. Pratt and probably Mr. Roberts, on the first Broadline estates, we talked about bringing electrical hookup as well. Would that be introduced in this one as well, or is this just sewer and water?
I'll let the electric bug talk.
Once the annexation occurs, I'll contact Artel Power and start the process for acquisition of service territory. That may take 2 to 6 or 7 months. Once that's done, hopefully by the end of the summer, this construction project's done, we'll be able to serve it.
Gotcha. So we would be doing the electrical install along with the water and sewer then?
Yeah, we could get an agreement with Artel to do that.
Okay, thank you.
okay, at this time, I'm gonna have Jay read the resolution, then I'll go to for comments from the public then.
Consideration of a resolution ordering the proposed sanitary sewer and water main improvements for County Road 131. Public Works Committee recommends approval of this resolution, and I so move.
Second.
There's a second. Okay, then at this time, we'll ask for the audience for participation as far as public comments or questions. Anybody like to speak up in regards to this project?
Hi, my name is Ken Foltz. I'm with Foltz Trucking. And one of the reasons we wanted to get city sewer and water services, our business is growing and continues to grow, and we find it beneficial to move forward with city water and sewer services. So we appreciate your support, and if you have any questions?
I guess one question that I just assumed, and I guess I shouldn't assume, but this is going to serve your maintenance shop as well as your office, correct?
This would just be the maintenance.
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Ken? Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the audience? If not, I'll close the public hearing on then. So at this time, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any comments from the council in regards to this project? If not, then all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries then. Looks like item D is a nuisance has been taken care of. That's off the table. So then we would move into Community Development Committee, and we'll call on Matt Bulkey.
Alrighty, 5A, consideration of resolution 2018, approving an amended variance to allow amended parking variance to allow 242 parking spaces at 1245 Washington Avenue. Kelsey, I don't know if you'd like to speak to this one?
I can give it a try. Basically, there's the existing, the original approval for Sanford Health at the clinic included a variance for a number of parking spaces, and that variance had a time frame on it, and over the period of years, that's been extended a couple of times. And last year, we actually had a similar request, and there was basically a one-year extension granted to that variance. That extension is again coming up due here in 2018. Sanford has come back and actually filed another request. The request actually went to the Planning Commission, was to actually remove that provision altogether, was to get rid of that parking requirement. The Planning Commission did make the recommendation to remove the parking requirement altogether. I believe the CDC recommendation is for another one-year extension, and that you should have a revised resolution on the table. And I'll just point to the second page. This resolution would basically require that those additional parking spaces be constructed by November 1st of 2019.
Okay. With that, the CDC Commission approved this, and I so move.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions on this at all? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item.
5B and 5C are both being deferred, and the applicant was okay with that. Moving on to 5D, consideration of a resolution setting a public hearing for the proposed vacation of public road right-of-way at 132 Sherwood Drive. This was discussed, and this is basically on the map, and there's a driveway, but absolutely nothing going to it, down by Kerfman Beach. We discussed this, and we recommend approval at the CDC, as do I.
Second.
Just motion and a second. Any comments on this at all? Any questions? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Item 5E, consideration to a second reading and adoption of ordinance 417, authorizing the rezoning of 839 South Shore Drive from RA, residential agriculture, to R2, which is 1 and 2 family residential district. We discussed this at CDC, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the council? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item F.
Consideration of the second reading and adoption of ordinance 418, amending city code 1007, relation to erosion and sediment control, the stormwater regulations MS4. This was discussed and approved at the CDC, and I so move.
Second.
Motion second. Any comments on this at all? Questions? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item.
5G, consideration of the second reading and adoption of ordinance 419 for the annexation of a 9.06 acre tract of land at 19085 County Road 131 and 18955 Highway 59 frontage road in Detroit Township, zoning a tract I-1 light industrial along with 19085 County Road 131 and 18955 Highway 59 frontage road. Kelsey, that was a whole lot. You want to explain that if you can?
That's basically the zoning of the Fultz Trucking property that's being annexed in.
Okay. We thank you. We discussed that at CDC, and we so move on this.
Okay, motion and second. Is there any comments from any in the audience as far as this particular item on this annexation? If not, any questions from people on the council? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
5H, consideration of the second reading and adoption of ordinance 420, establishing administrative penalties. I believe we were just updating these, and we discussed it at CDC, and I so move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed, motion carries. Okay. And then, looks like we go to the next item here is 6, and Jay, that's for you. Then.
So item 6A, what did we do with that?
We actually didn't have that discussion.
Oh,
Oh, he's here.
Looking at this one.
We were going to get back to it. John was going to talk, and then we never.
Update the council.
Yes, please.
So I think Pat is going to come to Public Works,
But Pat's here.
He is.
Well, I think I can still fill in the council. The Boys and Girls Club, every project everybody's aware of, getting closer and closer with some of the design and pulling plans and things of that nature together. One of the things that I should disclose, I'm on the building committee for the project, and one of the things we've identified is, unfortunately, the larger building that needs to go in up there. If everybody's been up there, it's sitting on the top of a hill. There's a larger building in there. That hill has to come down just to make a flat spot for this building. So that involves moving a lot of dirt and doing a fairly large grading project. There's a substantial amount of dirt that'll be moved up the project. And the unfortunate part is there's roughly 200 trees that will be impacted. Nobody's happy about it. It's not all of them, but it is a big chunk of them. They're nice oak trees, and nobody wants to lose them. But we thought it would probably behoove us to at least advise the council, since that is city property. So you don't just see that happen today.
Actually, I think it would be a good idea to get approval from the city because you're taking trees down in the park.
Our esteemed council over there thinks
Oh,
we should
you're
give
wrenching the
approval.
program.
So he's suggesting we get a motion then to do the tree removal.
Well,
Anyone
is there
wanna
a
make a
plan?
motion on that one?
It's about 208, if you want an exact number.
I just thought, you would have a
It's
plan
rough.
showing them what they wanted to.
Yeah, we do have a plan that we could bring. The club is actually working with somebody that's gonna come in and harvest the trees out of there. So,
Not only that, but there'll be some disappointed sledders that.
well, the hill will still be there for now.
That sounds like it'll be a little bit shallower.
The site is gonna come down at its highest point, which is actually northwest of the existing club. That's the highest point. At that point, it's coming down about 15 feet. Where the building's at is closer to where the parking lot's gonna be. And in that area, it's maybe coming down about, I think it's like 8 feet. So there still is going to be a substantial hill there, just not quite as substantial as theirs.
I can tell you this will be my least favorite motion ever, knocking down 100 trees.
I don't make a lot of sense on that.
200 trees.
Yeah.
Wow.
Question.
Please.
Isn't there some we talked a lot about buffering, I know at committee level at one point. Can we talk about replanting of trees at all?
I can tell you that the plan is the project will include a pretty substantial amount of landscaping and tree planting. Part of that to the condition that is a variance.
Yeah, there's
screening.
Screen to the north.
North, and I think a little bit on the east side.
And there also has to be a landscaping plan that's submitted with it, so.
The committee's aware of that. That will be integrated.
I think this would be a great opportunity for us to start a little fundraiser too. I think we could probably fundraise a couple hundred trees. I'd be the first to donate the first one. So
Pat's always looking for money. So
if this motion goes through, I think that there would be a way that we can get those trees replaced and in the future have some shade again. So reluctantly, I guess I'm going to make a motion for item 6A to remove some trees and do some excavation work for the new Boys and Girls Club project. Do I
Okay.
have a second?
Let's see, is there a second on that?
I'll second it if it's contingent upon re-landscaping and planting of additional trees.
Thank you.
Okay, and no one likes to cut down trees, but we've got a great project going. And this is for a new Boys and Girls Club, and it's going to be built for every kid in town that wants to go there. And we've got information now about replanting trees and putting buffer zones in and making it look like a nice area it will be along with the new building. So there's a motion, a second, to go ahead and remove these trees so we can do the project of building a brand new Boys and Girls Club. We've got a motion, a second. Matt, do you have any comment?
I have a question. I'm just playing devil's advocate here because it is a park. With the harvesting the trees, are we selling that timber?
We're getting the timber removed without having to pay for it. Okay. So we felt like that was actually, it's a savings to the
project.
Okay. No, and
So we're not selling it, but it's going away.
okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments? If not,
Mr. Vice Mayor,
Okay.
you might want to check with Mr. Pugh in case.
did you want to say anything on it all, Pat?
No, John hit it all. Right on. We will be doing some landscaping up there. We started the process of talking about that.
Okay, thank you. So if no other questions, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion will carry. Next item.
All right, so let's
B,
see
6B.
here. Well, 6B, is that, did we cover that with the other public hearing,
You
or?
want to say anything else on 6B there for discussion regarding assessment of firm policies for undeveloped properties?
Mayor and council, we had another lively debate about kind of deferral of assessments, and I think kind of where we came about that discussion. Again, we have a couple of projects we heard about tonight. We also have the Long Lake Phase 4 project. I think what we kind of landed on is, again, kind of using past practice of this UBC principle where we kind of standardize a per lot assessment is incorporated with a per foot assessment. And then, kind of where we landed was on these undeveloped properties, we would do a 5-year deferral for that base assessment. And then basically the UBC charge would be deferred until developed. But we thought, the discussion was we should sunset it after 20 years. So that's kind of what we landed on. There's nothing to act on, but the next time we have an assessment hearing, that's probably the direction we'll go. And at that point, the council will actually vote on the assessment role. So.
We felt there should be something put in here with the public works, because if we don't have a sunset, some of this could go out 40, 50 years that the city would be trying to get back into the coffers, and if we put a sunset on it, we'd at least start to get some of our money back after after 20 years. So that's the reason we had the discussion on that. So just want to bring it up for information for everybody. Next item.
So item C was just for discussion. Do we need to discuss that during this meeting? No, we're good?
No, I think we just got on it.
So I think I'm gonna combine items D and E. They're both requests to waive the $165 half-day fee for the nonprofit for over at the arena. We had a discussion on this and recommend denying both requests to waive the fee, the half-day fee, as it is in our rental agreement policy. And if we do it for these guys, then you gotta start fielding them for everyone. And this is why we have policies, so we recommend denying that, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for denial of these two items, D and E. Is there any comments at all from the council? If not, all in favor of denial, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
So let's see here.
Item F then on it.
Item F, consideration of the request from the DLCCC to reestablish a nonprofit rate for the pavilion for the 6th annual Tough Laker event on Sunday, June 24th, 2018. We recommend approval, and I so move.
Second.
So motion and second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
First,
Okay, comment?
Vice Mayor, I'd just like to make the comment because it would appear that we're treating some things differently here. But we took this action on the pavilion from the standpoint of the fact that for the Tough Laker, they don't actually use the building. So there's no staff time involved. There's no utilities involved. They just set up on the concrete apron in front of the pavilion. And they've been willing to pay the nonprofit rate from the last 2 years, but since we really cut nonprofit rates out of the pavilion, they came with that request, and we're doing it for that reason, because we don't have staff involved here.
And the building's still available to be rented during that.
Correct.
That's correct, and everything is outside like Madeline said, so that's the reason for that. Any other comments? All in favor of that motion, then say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Item G, consideration to a resolution of support and $18,825 city participation for Trail Link project connecting Highway 10 underpass to the County 54 Highway 10 intersection. Kelsey, do you want to speak to that one?
I might defer to John.
Sure.
This is a project that we're working cooperatively with Becker County on. The trail link, as it's referred to, is the construction of a multi-use trail going from the north end of the Trunk Highway 10 box culvert, the box culvert that doesn't go anywhere right now, and constructing a trail segment from that point back to County Road 54 along the north side of Highway 10. And the rationale and reason behind that is with the signal improvements that are scheduled there for 2020 with MnDOT, there's a number of pedestrian improvements, signals, railroad crossing there for not only snowmobiles but bikes. It felt prudent and to be the right time to get that connection back to the underpass. And without it, we're basically going to be sending people over Highway 10, which isn't, it's a long crossing there. So ultimately, this would provide some better access to the Heartland Trail that's planned for construction. And also the county's been working on making a trail connection up to the Mountain View area as well as DMRA. So it's a piece to the puzzle. The county's leading the effort on applying for these grants. They're going to apply to a couple. We'll probably be back in another month, but just looking for council support or city participation in this. There's generally viewed favorably if there's some local partnerships involved. So that's the project.
Because it's $18,000 contribution for something that is quite expensive.
And we possibly could get a $150,000 grant
Correct.
with us working together, so that's a
That's
plus
correct.
side of that.
Absolutely.
So we got a motion and a second, is that correct? You made a motion on that?
Second.
One second there, then okay. Any other questions?
I'm not sure why we're putting this on the north side of Highway 10, because basically we're now making that box culvert to nowhere. We've never really had this as a plan to go on the north side of Highway 10. It's always been on the south side. And right now, we're just basically spending $18,000 to the people to that intersection to cross the intersection instead of going to the box culvert, where I'd rather send little Timmy under Highway 10 than rather than going across the signals.
I think you're confused.
That's what this is.
So it's underneath the culvert. It's a trail going from there.
So
Can
why,
you put the map up? It is confusing.
well, why are we spending money to go north before we go on the south side? Because that's gonna get people into our town rather than up to a county facility.
We already have the trail on the south side. But on the south side of the box culvert, I'm sorry, unless the map, we can pull the map up. We, as a city, constructed from the south side of the box culvert all the way back to East Shore Drive, then Frazee Street, all the way into town, down McKinley. That's complete.
Is that
That is
complete?
in.
That's all,
That is in.
all paved and
That's all paved.
All paved,
All
ready to
done.
go.
So right now, we have a trail that goes out to the south side of the box culvert, and you can go under Highway 10. And that's
And then
it.
turn around and come right
Turn
back.
around
I've
and
done
come
it
back.
before, so that one is a trail to nowhere.
Yeah.
right, so
So this is basically completing what
This
they
will
were.
get it back, so that it would tie into the improvements that are planned with Becker County and MnDOT in 2020 at that 54 Highway 10 intersection, which will include a rail crossing and things of that nature. Am I making sense? So it's a link back. Without this link, nobody's gonna go over to the box culvert. They're gonna cross at Highway 10.
but the overall goal here is to get people from Frazee or from Park Rapids
Yep.
to Moorhead, and I don't see this as a real improvement. This is a spur off to get to someplace.
That's an accurate statement. It would serve you. This is all predicated on that that there's going to be a spur going up to Detroit Mountain, Mountain View. Right. That is accurate. That is accurate.
So we're completing a spur before we're completing the actual project.
You gotta do
it's
what
just
you
a
can
piece.
do when you
The package,
have the opportunity.
package of the piece.
Right now, there's no way to get, for kids
Piecework.
to get across, right, safely. So with DMRA making all these trails and everything, kids would have to be driven there. They can't bike at this point.
It's a piece of the puzzle.
Piece-
While I
piece
would
to put it
agree with you,
together.
It would probably be nice to have the other portion of the trail. It's all through common with these trails that we have to.
You kid.
Like, we have to do little chunks and with the big picture in mind. That's the best I can explain.
So one other comment is, how far is the county in terms of getting from now County Road 54 intersection to Detroit Mountain and then also up to Mountain View? Because I went to a meeting 2 years ago and there was just a study done and there was 4 options that were really non-conclusive, and basically there's no right of way, and the county at that point had no idea of how to get up there and didn't really have much of intention. So I'm just thinking spending $18,000 to get people to that point is a waste of money in my mind, and it hasn't come through the park board, and the park board's always been trying to get people into the city, not out to the county facility.
What Ken said is, the snowmobiles that will get them safely across the railroad tracks. And yes, you got to have the grant came available, things snowball, because you try to take advantage of. MnDOT's what we're working on, they're working on the lights and everything, and then at the same time, the railroad, we can improve that intersection for $18,000. It's a good opportunity to do that. The DNR, and you know, we're trying to keep pushing, we do have the money, and hopefully, I've not heard, I don't believe the plan review is totally done yet between the DNR and MnDOT. But hopefully, before this year is over, we'll have a set of plans that we'll go out for bids on to do, including Acorn, up to Acorn Lake and including Acorn Lake with the Heartland Trail project.
I would also.
And so by 2019, it won't be relied through.
I would point out too, whether this strikes you or not, when we redo Randolph Road, we're planning to widen Randolph Road such that there won't be parking on it. They actually be designated bike lanes on Randolph Road. It provides some access to some of the areas on the north side of the community. Again, if you are of the mindset that people would come down that way, this would provide a connection to that box culvert.
Okay.
Agreed.
Any other questions? I know what you're saying, Dan. Hopefully one day I'll be able to ride all over town on a bicycle. So we've got a lot of things need to be connected, and I hear what you're saying, but it's just part of the puzzle, and eventually we're going to get there.
And just as a person that has used that intersection many a time, riding my own bike out to Detroit Mountain and Mountain View, it's a challenging intersection, and I guess I'd rather have people going the box culvert than using a surface grade crossing, and it's a long ways across. And you got people going 65, 70 miles an hour there, so.
Okay, we have a,
What are you
okay,
suggesting again?
I guess I'd rather not have a surface crossing there if that's the option, because if we're using the box culvert and this box culvert to nowhere, let's not entice people to have to stop at that intersection, because otherwise Timmy might get wiped out, I might get wiped out, our city attorney might get wiped out at that intersection. It's just a bad situation. I'd rather have no possible way of getting hit rather than making a stoplight be the only barrier between a accident.
No, go ahead.
If I can, Alderman Josephson, I completely agree. I've actually had that conversation with MnDOT. Why do we have to put that surface crossing in? And the answer I got was, we have to. For them to put that traffic light in there, maybe you can explain it.
I advocated for some time that I thought it was bordering on the foolish to put head ramps in and a crosswalk across that highway. And as counterintuitive as it might seem, their ADA specialists are basically saying, no, it needs to go in. So I guess what I'm appealing to you a bit on, and ultimately, obviously, it's your decision, is without this trail, the only option is to use the surface. Will it eliminate all people from crossing Highway 10? No, it won't. But at least provides an option for people to go over to the box culvert, underneath 10, and back around and not use the surface crossing. MnDOT's interest in this and why they're helping and supportive of the project, they want as few of people crossing on 10
not only from a safety perspective, but you have APS, or the pedestrian buttons. When you push that on Highway 10, because of the speeds and the distance, that one person crossing can create quite a delay on Highway 10. And that's very interested in moving traffic volume on that particular roadway, which they should be. Does that make sense?
Can I just, I want to say something. I'm going to rephrase it to see if I understand this. If we don't do this spur, the only option for getting across Highway 10 will be the surface crossing. That's going in whether we do this or not.
That is
correct?
accurate.
If we do the spur, people then have the option of using the box culvert to get across Highway 10.
That is correct.
And then go, okay,
That is correct.
thank you.
Okay, any other comments? If not, I'm gonna call the motion.
That answered my question, but I would also hope that when this is done and constructed, whether it's parks or public safety, public works, whoever would look at this, would make signage aware. That if little Jimmy can't get across the street, you can have this option to go
I
around.
think we would include some signage with
Okay.
the design of the trail.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, then, so, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Jay.
Item H, consideration of a resolution approving the plans and specifications and ordering advertisement for bids for the Long Lake Annexation Phase 4, sanitary sewer and water main improvements. Public Works Committee recommends approval, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. John, do you wanna help us on this one here a little bit?
Unless there's specific questions, the short version of the story is we're asking for plan approval on the next phase of the Long Lake annexation. And I did tell Public Works, we are anticipating maybe a little uptick in the estimated project cost, but we'll find out once we take bids. So I would expect to be back here in probably 2 months' time with bids in hand. So,
And you think that this project could be, you said, close to 3 million?
we're looking at right around 3.9 million right
3.9
now,
million, then, okay.
which is a couple $100,000 higher than where we were at. So.
Okay, there's a motion and a second then on this resolution. Any other questions by the council? Any comments? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item I, consideration to a resolution approving the plans and specifications and ordering advertisement for bids for the Lake Forest 7th Edition Street and Utility Improvement Project. Public Works recommends approval, and I so move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any comments on this or questions? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item J, consideration to a resolution accepting a preliminary engineering report and setting a public hearing for March 13th, 2018 for Highland Estates Street and Utility Improvements on Lemon Road. And there's actually a revised resolution here. And Public Works Committee recommends approval of this new resolution, and I so move.
Second.
Motion and second. Any questions on this? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anything else, Jay?
No, sir.
Okay, then we'll move on to Finance, Dan Winter.
Thank you, Ron. First item on the agenda is we had people from Train come to the Finance Committee to talk about a program they're going to implement at the DLCCC, Guaranteed Energy Savings. And I just asked if Kelsey would just give us a few words as to why we're doing this and what it entails. So the short version.
Sure.
So.
Mayor and Council, a couple months ago, we entered into an agreement with Train to do a energy audit, an investment grade audit for the DLCCC. And basically the presentation was them presenting their findings of that audit. In summary, there's basically a recommendation for about $1.8 million worth of improvements, energy-related improvements over the DLCCC. Based upon their projections, we're looking at about a 15-year payback, looking at roughly a $90,000 per year energy savings that would go to offsetting the cost of the bond. And there's no action for tonight's meeting. Basically, we had an opportunity for Train to come and present that information to the Finance Committee. They're going to make a similar presentation to the DLCCC board, but I would expect potential action at the March council meeting, and that would actually be inking a deal to move ahead with the project, and then also working with our finance officer on actual financing the project too, so.
Okay, thank you. So item A is just for information at this
Yep.
time then.
And
Okay.
let people know what we're up to, so nobody's, everybody knows what we're bringing to the next meeting, so. If I could, I'd go on to item B.
Yes.
So this is another one, we've been actually reviewing donation requests at a couple of meetings here. But we've had requests from the Detroit Country Club, the Boys and Girls Club, and the Becker County History Museum for donations. And at the last meeting, we discussed a proposal where we would give funding potentially to all three entities, and got input from the city council at that time. And so we took the recommendations, when we considered this request again at Finance Committee, and considered their input from the city council at the time. But here's what we're recommending, okay, is that there be a donation of $100,000 to the Detroit Country Club. The liquor fund would make a contribution in early 2018 to cover the cost of a cart path of $70,000, and the second donation would be made from 2019 liquor fund for improvements, also to the Lakeview course. Again, $30,000 for the balance, or a total of $100,000. The Boys and Girls Club would include multiple components, and these, by the way, are included in a memo. I'm referring to that. That's in your packets. But what we would be looking at is a contribution, first of all, from the food and beverage tax funds of up to $175,000 for parking lot improvements. There's also City Park. The Boys and Girls Club is Frobisher City Park. So we're looking for, or we would provide $50,000 from the Park Dedication Fund for playgrounds and basketball courts. This has gone to the park board, and they agreed with that recommendation, or made that recommendation. And then an in-kind contribution of $25,000 for parking lot lighting from essentially public utilities, and a cash contribution of $50,000 to be provided over 5 years for naming rights to the class room from the public utilities for a total of $300,000. So that we're going to recommend that. And then finally, with the Becker County Museum, we're looking at a possibility of $175,000 towards the parking lot improvements there, but there's questions as far as what the total amount will be and who owns what property. So at this time, what I'll do is make a motion for the Country Club and the Boys and Girls Club to fund those, but we'll keep the Historical Society in mind for the future when those costs and their plans are nailed down further. So if you want, Kelsey, I'll repeat that in the form of a motion. I think that would be the safest.
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I could do that too. Anyway, let me put it this way then. In order to save time, thank you, Madeline. Basically the Finance Committee did review this proposal and what we want to do here and what I talked about, and recommend going ahead with it. So I so move, but certainly would repeat anything for anybody that wants to hear it.
There's a motion and there's a second?
Second.
And there's a second. Any questions by the council for the Finance Committee?
Just to dumb that down so I know what I'm
Sure.
voting on here.
Yep.
$100,000 for the country club.
Yep.
And $300,000 for boys and girls.
Yep.
The museum has been tabled until we know further expenses.
Right, but we
Okay,
do
thank you.
have a thought process on where we would help.
Okay.
Where we go.
Thank you, Dan.
From. Yep.
We just have to get the deed process and that worked out.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Wow, I could have done the whole thing so much quicker.
Well, it's the equivalent of $300,000.
Yeah.
It's not
Correct.
cash.
Yeah,
No,
correct.
no,
Yes,
no.
In-kind
so
system.
25,000 is
From-
in kind. Yep. But I thought it was important that everybody understand the different
Correct.
funds we're pulling this from. So.
Yep,
And,
thank you.
and just to remind the public that the the food and beverage taxes is being used for this
Right,
project.
and the reason that we're using it for parking lot, to remind everybody, is there's only a few things that the food and beverage tax can be used for. And one of them is parking lots, the other is aquatic invasive, or invasive species.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries then.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on then to the fee schedule for the Detroit Country Club. It's included in your packets. The Finance Committee recommended approval of that, and I so move.
Second.
There's a motion, a second for the fee schedule for the Detroit Lakes Country Club for this coming year. Is there any questions on that at all? Actually, there's been very little increase on it, and so all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries.
Item B is approving the concession lease to permit the Detroit Country Club to operate the bar and restaurant at the Detroit Country Club. Again, the Finance Committee reviewed both the lease and the process used to determine the leasee, and we recommend approval, and I so move.
Second.
There's a motion, a second to approve the concession lease permit for the Detroit Lakes Country Club to operate the bar and restaurant at the DL Country Club for the year 2018. Any questions at all? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries.
Thank you. Item E is a first reading of an ordinance to amend our dock license application. I'm going to ask Kelsey here to let us know why we're doing that. So, and it is in your packet too.
Mayor and council, basically items E and F are very similar. In our ordinance, we actually state a dollar figure for the liability insurance. The problem is that the insurance requirement kind of changes over time. So what we're doing is amending the ordinance so both those sections of our city code refer actually to a state statute which deal with our basically our liability and coverage.
We'll need to take these motions, ordinances one at a time, but
right.
So I will tell you that again, the Finance Committee did look at the draft ordinance 422 and recommends approval of the first reading.
Okay, there's a motion second. We got a second here then?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I guess I'm just questioning this and more asking a question, but it says dock lease application. Is this for commercial as well as private on the city beach?
This doesn't change the dock ordinance at
Gotcha.
all. All we're really, I mean, it doesn't change the substance of how you get a permit or who can get a permit or who can apply.
Gotcha.
All we are doing here is when we get a dock application, we require that they provide liability insurance. And the existing ordinance says that I think we have $300,000 or $400,000 worth of insurance. But the tort liability cap in Minnesota now pursuant to the statute is $1.5 million. So what we're saying is they have to have insurance up to that liability.
Gotcha.
And it's identical. I mean, these are different sections of our ordinances, but they both refer to portions of the ordinance that talk about how much liability insurance an applicant has. So that's all we're doing.
Okay. Thank you.
So you still need to vote.
Okay, so we need to vote on that. So all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries.
So, and then item F is first reading of ordinance 423, amending the city code for temporary expansion permits for sidewalk cafes relative to liability insurance requirements. Finance Committee reviewed it, recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Next item is public safety. Matt, what do you have for us?
8A, consideration of requesting quotes for forfeiture vehicle towing services for 2018, 2019. Chief, is this something you'd like to bring up to us?
Whatever you prefer.
Okay. I'm going to give it a whack. Basically, what the city is taking liability for any forfeiture vehicles we have. We're looking to put out to bid with any tow company in Detroit Lakes that would take that off our plate. Anything to add, Chief?
No.
Okay.
No comments, sir.
So, that was recommended by the Public Safety Committee to go out, put it out for bids, see what they come back in as, and I so move on that one.
Motion, is there a second? Yeah, there's a second. Any other questions on this? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Okay, that's all we had for the public safety. I did want to take a few minutes here, and Chief is going to bring to light and kind of show us what his new equipment would be for his squad cars.
Chief Todd, come on up.
I'll try to be brief. I know you guys are backed up on your agenda, but over the past few months, I've been sending you guys some department newsletters informing you of some equipment that we've purchased, and it's unfortunate that we need equipment like this, but already this year there's been 16 police officers killed in the line of duty in the United States. So through some creative funding sources that we figured out, we purchased some equipment that's going to help keep our officers safer in the line of duty, and this is a level 4 vest, so level 4 is protecting the officer from rifle fire, and then a level 3A helmet, which is most handguns and some smaller caliber rifles. If you guys want to look at it or hold it, we can do that, or we can try to put it on, whichever.
Just the lawyer?
I'm thankful that we were able to make these things work out. This equipment is expensive, but it's really standard issue in law enforcement today. Again, it's sad that we need it, but I'm happy that our officers have it. So I purchased one set of each of these for each squad car in the city, and then we have a set for the investigators to share too. So that's about it.
Chief, can you tell the public what the cost of this equipment is for safety?
I haven't looked up the invoice for the vests. I want to say I paid about $2,500 for 7 vests, and I believe the helmets were about $240 a piece, if that helps.
Okay.
So
it's all for safety for our police officers, and that's what's needed today.
So one thing that I want to address with you, so the stuff kind of looks scary if you're not familiar with this kind of equipment. It looks like SWAT or military equipment. The officers are not going to be wearing these around every day when they're on patrol. Okay, this is only going to come out if there's a threat of gunfire. So I want you to be assured that this isn't anything that's going to be changing the look. We're still going to be wearing the same blue uniform that I'm wearing right now, and these things will be for emergency situations where we're worried that officers might not go home then. So that's all I have.
And so you're going to have a set for every officer then?
Every officer's car. There's
yeah.
a set in every single car, and we bought those tubs that you see, the Rubbermaid tubs, so it's got kind of a green lid so we know where to grab, so everything's in a one-stop shop. So, yeah, I'm thankful that we're able to get it, and I appreciate your support and helping us get these items for our officers. If you want to try them on afterwards, we can let you do that.
Thank you, Chief. That's all for public safety.
Okay, next item is liquor and gambling. Amy, please.
All right, Liquor and Gambling has one item on the agenda for consideration, which is the request from the Public Trust Committee for a cash donation for fireworks display on February 17, 2018. Previous year's donations from the liquor fund were $400 for 2016 and 2017, and we recommend the same amount for this year.
Second. There's a motion, a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Anything else, Alderman? Okay. Let's move on to item 10, the public utilities. Madeline, do you have anything there?
Yes, we, the commission this morning met, and we're giving consideration to a resolution accepting the offer of the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority. And the utilities group loves acronyms. So what you really get is MPFA, to purchase a general obligation sewer revenue note, Series 2018A, in the original aggregate principal amount of $16 million. Don't we wish it was 16,000? $16,336,065, providing for its issuance and authorizing the execution of a project loan agreement. And I might just call on our public utilities manager to kind of renew what this is all about for now.
Yeah, this is just the loan amount that we will end up having to repay for the new wastewater treatment facility. Recall there's about $17,040,105 for grant money in this. There are some covenants tied to this loan agreement. We have to have rates in place to adequately fund the debt service payments of this loan. You have to have an O&M account, a capital account, and a debt service account. We also have to place 40 cents per 100 cubic foot billing units into a renewal replacement account for replacement equipment in the future. So that's the highlights of our $16 million loan agreement in a nutshell.
So I move that we accept that offer. Oh, we need to, our finance officer would like to comment a couple of things about this.
I just want to make sure that it's, that everybody knows that the interest rate on this PFA loan is 1.099%.
Pretty amazing interest rate.
For 20 years?
20 years.
Very good, thank you.
So we are moving to accept that offer.
Okay, there's a motion, there's a second? Well, there's a second then to go ahead for a principal amount of $16,336,065 for this loan agreement. Any questions? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries. Next item is some items I have here for the mayor's agenda. He's been looking for some volunteers to help on various boards. And the first one, the mayor would like to appoint Karen Scoils to be on the park board. Is there a motion to accept her? There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion, a second for Karen Scoils to be on the park board. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. The next one, the mayor would like to appoint Chad Calverum to the Sports Arena Commission. Is there a motion to accept him? Motion. There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion to second, so all in favor of Chad say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next item, to recommendation of the Becker County Fair Board, the mayor would like to appoint Sean Eckert to the Sports Arena Commission. Is there a motion to accept him?
So,
Motion is second. There's a second, so all in favor of the motion say aye for Sean.
aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next one is D, the mayor would like to appoint Susan Bjorklund to the Planning Commission. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor of Susan Bjorklund to be on the Planning Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries. Next item, the mayor would like to appoint Eric Landmark to the Planning Commission. Is there a motion? So we got a motion, a motion and a second. All in favor to appoint Eric to the Planning Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the motion passes then. Item F, the Becker County Assessor has notified the city that the Board of Review for 2018 assessment will be held at Becker County on April 25th, 2018, starting at 9:30. The mayor would like to appoint the Board of Equalization, which is Alderman Zeman, Alderman Josephson, and Alderman Mark Erickson for this job on April 25th for the Board of Reviews. Is that, if that's fine,
Do
is
we
there a
have to have a
motion?
motion for that?
Have to motion for that then?
Well, I certainly move that
Okay,
you all can hear that.
second, okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. The term of Jeff Stoneman of the DL Community Foundation expires on March 31st. Mr. Stoneman has served 1 3-year term and he's eligible to be appointed. All in favor of having Jeff to continue, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and second for Jeff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The term of Dave Langworthy on the Tourism Bureau expires on March 31st, 2018. Mr. Langworthy has served 1 3-year term and is eligible to be reappointed.
So moved.
I don't know if the mayor's talked.
That's kind of my
They
question.
haven't then, okay, all right. Okay,
Well, now we can tell Mr.
Tell him
Stoneman
they've
that
been
he has no choice. We already said he does.
He's locked in.
let's go ahead and finish it up here and we can tell they've been approved and when he gets back, I thought this was all done here. So for Dave, he has served 1 3 and he's eligible to be reappointed, so. The motion made in a second?
Second.
Second, okay.
If we're gonna do it.
So all in favor to reappoint Dave, say aye. Aye. Opposed, okay. And the last one is Doug Hasselman on the tourism bureau. He has served 1 3-year term. He's eligible to be appointed again. So if we get his approvals, I want a motion to approve him. So move. Second it. Sure. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. Okay. Items not on the agenda. The city administrator or staff, do you have any comments at this time? None then, okay. Anybody from the audience like to make any comments? If not, Dan? Any comments?
Nothing.
Comments?
Oh,
Okay.
I do have one. We should comment on our Public Works Director who won that great curling tournament this
Curling, we have a
weekend.
curling champion amongst us here.
Yeah, yes.
Bragging rights. It's
Roger Lee Rink, team by Roger Lee, Gene Benson, Brad Green, and Keith Hodgson, won the Vern Turner Memorial Tournament now.
Nicely done.
It's gonna cost me a brewery to make it over if he doesn't know.
Okay. Very good then. And Matt, Chip, okay.
Just want to reiterate what you said with the Polar Fest Committee, the Ice Castle. It's brought a lot of people to town, and it's a lot of excitement during the winter months. So thank you to all the volunteers.
Okay, and I want everybody to look at item D. Those are the joint governments meetings that we've got. The next one is coming up on April 3rd. The Chamber's putting it on, so please plan to be there. If there's no other business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.